You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts with the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us for this Locked On Texas Tech special edition. It's your Big 12 Weekly. We're taking a glance outside the confines of the 806 and a couple of different things to dive into here today. We'll get to Big 12 spring meetings concluding and thoughts from Brett Yormark. And what would you do if you just got married? And I mean, as soon as you get home from the honeymoon, your wife says, "Hey, don't worry about all those rumors. I'm definitely staying with you." Would you be a little skittish on the future? I'll tell you what I'm talking about in just a moment. But Chris, let's get
Depends on how the honeymoon went.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Let's get to these spring meetings for the Big 12 Conference and some of what Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark has had to say here this week. First and foremost, $470 million, the distribution for league members, which is a record. But one thing that the Big 12 really used to have going for it that other conferences didn't, Chris, was you had to split only among 10 members. So your member institution payout was right there at number 3 nationally, only behind the Big Ten in the SEC to give you a leg up, again, when you only had 10 members. Now, a record amount as far as the total is concerned, $470 million, but more mouths to feed. So you're spreading that around a little bit further. Brett Yormark saying, well, a callback basically to what he said already, that they're open for business now more than ever. So a couple more things I want to get into, but $470 million, Chris, and really curious to see where they can take this number. I guess we'll worry about the member institution payout at another time, but wondering where this thing can go now that you have expanded twice with the first 4 editions and then the following 4.
Yeah, you know, the dollar figure always gets a lot of news, and you're right, you're having to share it. There's not as much blueberry pie to eat as you used to get. As other folks get a sliver as well, and you're phasing some folks in. I think the 4 editions from the first 4 editions, I should say, the Central Florida's, Houston's, BYU's, and those folks, that they will be eased into this, whereas I think Arizona and that Utah and that whole crew, they get full shares immediately. But it's the most you've given out. I think that the new TV deal will kick in. It's going to be a bit more. Now, granted, you owe more money going out too with these with the settlement and the revenue sharing and all these different things. But that's why this number is ultimately why Brett Yormark is so focused on Mexico, Vegas, all the things that can enhance and increase revenue for his league, because you're trying to grow that number is ultimately what his task is. And whether it's adding schools and expanding, again, only if it really grows that number, I think would be the scenario. But I think trying to look at all these different ways to. And it's funny about Yormark in that what has happened over, say, the last 6 months to a year with the professionalization of college athletics, if I can go that far, because I mean that's what it is. It's professional sports.
I think you can.
Yeah, it just is. They are student athletes, but they're paid student athletes, and it was always a business, much more so now. But I think that as it's changed, I think Brett Yormark's, and I think he's kind of said this, like, man, my skill sets in the NBA and all the things that I've been involved with, they're more relevant or prevalent now than ever before on how I can operate, what I can do, what we can get into, what we can consider. And I think that's makes him being your commissioner maybe more important now than ever before as you continue to morph and change and all these things, because that's all he's really prior to this. That's all he'd been involved with is professional sports, whether it be boxing or the NBA or whatever it was, and which is heavily sponsored, heavily marketed, and all the things. And I think that his new job now is and the way it's changing is going to allow him to use a lot of that expertise more now than maybe it was when he first took the job, which is crazy to think, but that's the reality of it.
Well, that kind of ties into one interesting thing that he had to say, saying in part, I think we're going to thrive in this changing environment. He said, I think my skill sets are more transferable now than ever before. I'm excited to be here. I've said it before, best job in my life. And previously with, Rockefeller or whatever, I don't know how much fun it'd be having to negotiate a contract with Beanie Siegel. Probably not all that much fun. So maybe that has something to do with it. But I do think you're onto something there when you really talk about the future of college sports and what skill set is going to be best to really put whatever you're in charge of in a position to succeed. Does Brett Yormark's skill set, translate to the college sports of 1985 or 1995 as well? I don't know. And we'll see, I guess, what the future holds as far as it translating here very successfully. But I thought that was interesting. And he also did you mentioned Mexico. So he did also touch on Big 12 Mexico. He says he reluctantly postponed the Big 12 Mexico initiative and says the plan is to go forward in 2025. He says, quote, Mexico will always be there for us, end quote.
Yes, it will.
This is kind of an interesting turn of events as far as putting that on the back burner. It's lost on me. I don't get it, but I'm not the Big 12 commissioner. So we'll see what decision-making is going to come about as a result of that if you see that actually happening. He was asked about actively seeking expansion. He said, quote, no, I am not, which I also thought was interesting because he always talks about being open for business. I really hadn't, when expansion questions come about, I really haven't heard him just say no. I don't think I've heard that word come out of his mouth. Whether you believe it or not, I don't think I've heard that word. So that stuck out to me also.
Well, in the same teleconference or media availability that was in Waco, did he not say we've never been more open for business?
He did say that. Yes.
Okay. And then also, are you actively, seeking expansion or whatever? So I guess both can be true. If you don't
at this minute, I'm not right. But when
if you don't think he's got his ear to the ground and ready to be a disruptor, or just give somebody a hug that may need it and say, "Come on down." I think you're very naive. I think everybody is looking at you, ACC, and we all know you're on borrowed time. And whatever that looks like, I'm not real sure. But if especially if you want to really add in the East Coast part of it, if you really want to help out your league, and then also the West Virginias and Cincinnati's and UCFs of the world, I mean, you got to be kidding yourself if you don't think that if you had a legitimate offer that the Virginia Techs, the Louisvilles, the Pitts, some of those folks would geographically make a ton of sense. I don't know what the future of the ACC is going to look like, but if they lose Florida State and Clemson, you scooped up some schools. Now what's going to turn out to be 8 schools, and you were able to salvage things. But I don't know what the ACC feels like they may be able to comparably add if they start losing folks. If you lose North Carolina as well.
Yeah.
So I do think that while he may not be, actively on the phone, he knows what's up, and would be ready to pounce if Florida State and Clemson need a new home. At least he'd pitch them. North Carolina too. Do I envision necessarily that happening? Not certainly, but those other ones that I mentioned, I can envision a scenario where they would say, please call, kind of thing. and we will answer if you want to make a phone call. So, I think those profiles also fit very well with what the Big 12 currently is. Those ones. Yeah. And it would actually connect more dots and fill in where you already are. Yeah. Now, I don't think you're still pounding the pavement for like the Gonzaga thing. I think that may have been more of I don't want to say it was a threat. I think it was a very real option. I know that they actually did talk to Gonzaga, and Gonzaga was ready to do it. The Big 12 everybody wasn't on the same page there. But like we were talking about in our Voices from the Comments show that we did previously, that came out a day or so ago. I think that, we talked about that top 10. Gonzaga is firmly in that top 10. And that's the whole lure of the Zags. But I don't think there's still, this conversation that's ongoing or anything like that. I think that if I'm Brett Yormark, I'm well aware that Gonzaga will do it. Maybe they change their mind. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But I think if he ever wanted to call or wanted to push that button with the Z on it, I think that he knows he could always push it. It's kind of like Mexico. Mexico and Gonzaga are always going to be there for us. So, but I think the ACC is where you would be pretty serious about any sort of expansion. But I think right now, until the Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina situation rides itself out, and the ACC is more than okay with. I've heard it termed they're going to play the four corners offense. They're just going to play delay a game, and they're going to string it out and use the court system and everything as much as they can just to keep kicking the can down the road. And there's also something in the ACC TV contract that if they dip below a certain amount of members, that their TV deal is, I don't know if it's null and void or if it takes a serious hit. And this is why many feel like that they added the SMUs and those folks on the West Coast just to give themselves a bit of a buffer if and when, because I do think it's a matter of time. Again, I don't know where they're going, but, the Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina triumvirate, I think that is just borrowed time. And I think that's what allows them to stay afloat with their TV contract, which is still – 2035 or something. It's still forever off into the distance, and I think they're just trying to make sure that they've got. But I'd be willing to bet you that you may have some folks that would love for their phone to ring.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And we also know how kicking the can down the road works out, as we experienced a little bit of that following the departure of Missouri, Nebraska, Colorado, and
Texas
I can't remember the other one.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
That's right.
It's so long ago.
I should have known what you were doing. That's my fault.
I'm getting a little older. I can't remember everything as well as I used to. I wanted to get your thought on this before we get on to another topic. The private equity angle is probably kind of difficult to process or digest for some fans. I know it is for me, knowing exactly how this fits, if it fits at all. But Brett Yormark was asked about private equity involved in college sports or being involved in college sports. And he said, quote, "Private equity has been out there in the news and people are thinking about it. In some respects, private equity is a validation of where this industry is going and the growth. I don't look at it as a bad thing," end quote. And maybe this is one of those areas where, as we were talking about, some transferable skills or transferable familiarity from other industries could be an advantage. I don't know. This is a conversation that's coming. I don't know how quickly, and I don't know if it is actually going to find a place as far as private equity support or funds within college sports, but the conversation is going to be had, right?
This really made news when I think that Florida State is looking at a $500 million exit fee bill to get out of the ACC and the grant of rights. And I think that there is some Florida State-backed, private equity firms that have engaged, one of which I think Drew Weatherford is one of the faces of, former quarterback at Florida State. And I think that, I don't remember the exact number, but it's like $1 billion is kind of like part of the fund that they kind of – and the private equity, I'm not super knowledgeable about said subject like you are, right? But one thing I do know is private equity is there's a bit of a bad rap there in that they typically throw money at stuff. They take what sometimes could be a good product or service, they make it worse, but they'll turn a profit. Whether it's you can just enter what kind of ever service or business or company that you want to, and they figure out a way to refine it, and it may not be as good, as rewarding for said customer or whatever, but the company ultimately at the end of the day is making a profit. And I've even seen a lot of chatter about, and this is why you're bringing this up, that colleges, because of these bills that are going to come due, would they be interested in going, we need help, and you're sitting on a pile of cash. I've seen discussions about, could they, because they're not going to do, this isn't a donation. This is like, we're investing here, but we expect our money back and then some. This is why, This is the whole point of our existence. Like, could we take a cut of every ticket you sell? Could we get a percentage of the TV revenue that you are bringing in exchange for, we'll pay a lot of these bills on the revenue sharing or whatever that you want to use their money for. And so I think that some are reluctant, some are a little more interested than others. It just depends on everybody's situation. I mean, I don't think that most schools are going to want to go this route because they don't necessarily need the help yet. But I think there's some that are on the fringe that would certainly say it's worth talking to some folks about. I think that's why, like Texas Tech, for example, you are extremely fortunate to, you're now tapping into some of that. What's the new fund that you're tapping into now from the state of Texas? It's not the Puff Fund, but it's the
other one they won't. They came
well,
up with
yeah, the other one that I think Houston and Texas Tech and maybe North Texas and I forget Texas State. There's monies coming in that way. You are very fortunate to have people like Cody Campbell and Dusty Womble that have done extremely well and are willing to help when needed, and others, not just those two, but those are two of the ones that I think elicit. But so I don't know if this is something for you or for a league yet, but it's certainly there. It's certainly something. And Florida State may, in fact, say, we want out of this situation so bad. Yeah, we're willing to give a percentage to this private equity firm of every ticket that we sell from now until wherever, if they will buy us out of this deal or whatever it may be. So I don't know. It's a bit tricky, and I think that some are a little bit leery of it being involved with college athletics, but I think others are saying, hey, man, I really don't care. I'm interested in the games.
Yeah.
Whatever keeps it together and makes my Saturday afternoons in the fall as pleasurable as possible, whatever it took to get to that point, I don't care. I don't owe any money. I'm not, you know what I mean? And so there's some that just are like, hey, man, I don't really, just get me to the first Saturday in September, and then away we go for the next 3 or 4 months, and I'll take a wild ride, and I'll love every bit of it, and then I'll let everybody else worry about all the other stuff.
Yeah, we don't care how the sausage is made, or at least some of us don't. Some of us do.
Sausage is good, though.
But you kind of, you let the wolf in the hen house. If you want to view them as a wolf, I don't really necessarily view them that way, but I know some view that situation possibly that way. You invite the vampire in. Whatever. I'm out of cliches. Anyway, you get the idea. It could have some unintended consequences. So I'll be curious to see how that plays out. And some may be leery of it for college sports. For podcasting, specifically this one, not leery at all. Any private equity that wants to get involved with Locked On Texas Tech, just send me an email there I'll probably have to come up with an email address if we want to get involved in those types of things, I guess. So I'll get to work on that over the weekend. Hey, before we get out of here, why did I bring up a honeymoon that's having to shoot down rumors about a breakup as soon as they get back? Well, it's because of the Utah Utes. First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite events again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals. And I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. And of course, it's always at the lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that last beer at the tailgate at your own pace, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. They give you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast and easy, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. And it's because of a guy from the New York Daily News named Dick Weiss, who's tweeted this, Chris. He said, speculation is circulating about potential shifts in college sports conferences. There is discussion about Utah possibly moving to the ACC despite its recent move to the Big 12. Well, some suggesting the ACC might be a better fit due to its ESPN network agreement and potential for increased TV value. I don't know if the ACC is greasing Dick's palm or whatever. Or they're like getting him to put this out. I don't know what is exactly happening in this case, but it actually led, you know how Twitter goes. I mean, people are running with this like, oh, is there anything here? And it led to Utah Athletics actually releasing a statement via Brett McMurphy saying, quote, we are proud to be entering into membership in the Big 12 Conference in the coming months and excited to join our new colleagues and member institutions. A report over the weekend that suggested otherwise is completely fabricated and irresponsible, end quote. So nothing to see here, I guess, right?
Well, one, Dick Weiss is a very reputable, journalist with one of the New York papers, and he's been around for a long time, right? I mean, I think that his sources are going to be on the East Coast. One would surmise that, that those are ACC sources, I guess. I think that he's not going to run with something and just conjure it up out of thin air. Was he carrying somebody's water? Maybe. It's also worth mentioning that Utah hasn't exactly been just this new member to the Big 12 that's just really thrilled to be here. They have their fan, and I think Kyle Whittingham actually in a recent interview actually said something about when he was asked about BYU and the rivalry and all that. He's like, well, we've always played, and now it's a conference deal, but there's no guarantee that it'll stay this way for in the coming years. And almost people are like, huh? What? What do you mean? So I think that Utah is like in a position to get an invite to the ACC, or no, but I also don't. I think with what we've seen reported and how this has worked over the last 14 years, you'd be really naive to just kind of toss it aside and be like, nothing to it.
Of course. Yeah.
Never
say never kind of thing.
Yeah. Does it make a lot of sense to me? Absolutely not. What somebody's intention was here in leaking this or having it reported, that's a good question. I'd be more curious about that than I would anything, because a lot of times it's not that Utah could be it's kind of like the Gonzaga stuff with, were you really trying to add them, or were you just trying to tell like the Arizona schools, Colorado and Utah, hello, like we got other options, people, you better jump. I don't know. So what was the reasoning for this being leaked would maybe more what I'd be more curious about, as opposed to, do I think that Utah and the ACC are going to join forces? Speaking of air travel, what are we doing? So
it's a hell of a lot closer than Stanford.
It is. Touche. Yeah, I don't disagree, and it would give them some West Coast mates for sure. But
nothing has to make sense for it to be possible in college sports anymore.
And I think that it's since been reported that the difference in the TV revenue between the Big 12 and the ACC is negligible at best.
Yeah,
there's not enough of a gap there to where it would make a lot of sense. So anyway, my interest was piqued, but I think it did it for an athletic department to go, okay, we got to send something out, folks. I thought that was pretty interesting as well. But anyway, we'll keep an eye on it. You never know, man.
I'm glad that Utah fans are passionate about their program, and we want fans like that in the Big 12 Conference. I'll let Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado fans in on something. That's the kind of thing that helps to keep your conference from crumbling and being destroyed like the Pac-12 was. So that's good that you do feel that way. We need more of that from some of the Arizona and Arizona State, I guess, presently. And I'm talking from a football perspective. But I don't really get the holier than thou. I could have sworn you were a Mountain West program, just like 30 minutes ago. I don't know. Maybe I'm just misremembering. One more thing on the Big 12 Conference before we get out of here, Chris. Yours and mine, Dallas Mavericks, are in the NBA Finals. And I just wanted to point that out because if you're a fan of a Big 12 program and not rooting for said Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals, you're rooting against Big 12 Business Advisory Board member Jason Kidd. This is one of the most hilarious tweets I saw this week. The Big 12 Conference, after the score went final the other night, said, "Congrats to the Dallas Mavericks and Big 12 Business Advisory Board member Jason Kidd on their NBA Finals berth." They had a picture of Yormark with Jason Kidd and Luka Doncic. So the Big 12 Conference is a Dallas Mavericks conference, right? I mean, we're all on the same page, I'm sure.
I will tell you, I have two dogs. One of them is named Finley, after Michael Finley of the Dallas Mavericks. So I've been a Maverick fan a long time, and I didn't exactly expect this to happen. But yeah, shout out to the Big 12 Zone, Jason Kidd, even though he really graduated from that ACC school known as Cal. Back in the day, he was a Golden Bear. But yeah, man, I'm all about if we can blend our Locked On Texas Tech podcast, the Maverick success, and the Big 12 all in one. I'll give it a big hug too, man. I got no problem with that.
Very easy to connect. And yeah, I don't know. The ACC, I don't know if you're trying to take credit for Jason Kidd or not. They probably are. But that's Big 12 country, all right? Once upon a time, Big 12 Business Advisory Board member, which, of course, we all knew there was a business advisory board that included Jason Kidd before that tweet, I'm sure. We're not new at this. All right, Chris, appreciate your extra time. As always, man, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, man, appreciate it. Keep hope alive. We'll talk to you early next week, folks. Enjoy the time off if you get some over the weekend.
There you go. Thanks for being out there, and get subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode. And the best way to help us grow the show is to comment anything below on YouTube. So thanks to those who do. For Chris, I'm Casey, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.